Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be doing my weekly wrap-up for the week ending December 7th. I'm participating in a new reading event this month that was created by Vin at Revenant Reads. This is The Ghost of Christmas Past, Resurrecting a Tradition, a ghost story reading event. I will put all of the hosts in the notes below. This is a reading event where we are practicing the Victorian tradition of reading ghost stories during the Christmas season. We're doing a group reading of The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is the first work by Elizabeth Gaskell that I've read, and I loved this story. We're going to be talking about this in a Voxer group as well. I read the story in this collection that I have, Victorian Ghost Stories by Eminent Women Writers. A terrific collection that includes, in addition to the Gaskell story, it includes stories by people like Charlotte Bronte, Mary Elizabeth Braddon, Rosa Mulholland, Margaret Oliphant, and Willa Cather, among several others. Most of the stories in this collection had originally appeared in popular family journals and magazines that began their long run in the 1850s and really continued until the onset of World War II. Journals like Household Words, All the Year Round, The Cornhill, St. James Magazine, Temple Bar, Argosy, Tinsley's, St. Paul's, the Saturday Review, and others. In addition to reading The Old Nurse's Story, I also listened to the story in a delightful series of videos prepared by Mark at Book Time with Elvis. And he's one of the event's co-hosts. He made a series of videos of himself reading this story. His reading was just really phenomenal. And I'm going to put a link in the notes, at least to part one of the story, so that you can find that and give a listen, and then you'll find the other parts there as well. I encourage everyone to listen to Mark's terrific reading of this story. Additionally, I'm reading ghost stories, the ghost stories of Edith Wharton. These are also really terrific. I had no idea that Edith Wharton wrote ghost stories until this past fall when I found this book when I was looking for some things to read for for the spooky season. The story of how Edith Wharton became a writer of ghost stories is pretty interesting in and of itself. She actually had a terrible fear of ghosts and ghost stories, and this resulted from something that happened to her when she was a child. She apparently had a near fatal attack of typhoid fever as a little kid. And I think she was around 9 when she became ill. And she was in the process of recovering when somebody gave the family, some stories for her to read, and she read this ghost story that, at least according to her telling, it so frightened her, so terrified her that she had a relapse of the disease. I mean, she blamed the relapse on this experience of reading this story that horrified her. I'm just going to read a little bit from this. This comes from from her. This is in the introduction to the book. She said, "When I came to myself, it was to enter a world haunted by formless horrors. I had been a naturally fearless child. Now I lived in a state of chronic fear. Fear of what? I cannot say. And even at the time, I was never able to formulate this terror. It was like something dark, indefinable. It was like some dark, indefinable menace, forever dogging my steps, lurking and threatening. I was conscious of it wherever I went by day, and at night it made sleep impossible unless a light and a nursemaid were in the room." Well, the introduction goes on to explain how this fear really followed her well into her 20s. And she said at one point she couldn't even sleep in a room if there was anything resembling a ghost story, any kind of fiction that could possibly frighten her. She couldn't sleep in the room. And she wrote about this in her own autobiography. She says here, she wrote in her autobiography, "Till I was 27 or 8, I could not sleep in a room with a book containing ghost stories, and that I have frequently had to burn books of this kind because it frightened me to know they were downstairs in the library." Well, somewhere in her late 20s, she found another way of dealing with this issue, and she began to actually write some ghost stories. She sort of, I think, just in using her imagination to get the fears and the horrors, out of her head and on paper, she was somehow able to overcome this crippling fear. Just really fascinating. And apparently she became, although that's not what she's known for at all, but she became a really, really phenomenal writer of ghost stories. And I've read just 3 of the stories in this collection so far. She's really, really good. I mean, they're really sort of chilling, your hair on the back of your neck stands on end. Those kind of spooky ghost stories. So I'm really looking forward to reading some more of these. I'm trying to read one an evening. Okay. Also, I've been talking about this in a couple of videos. I'm participating in the Pineiro Project, where we are reading all of the works of Claudia Pineiro in translation. We are in the middle now of discussing her book, Time of the Flies. And this is her newest work of fiction that's been translated into English. Pineiro is a well-known Argentinian novelist who is often classified as a crime writer, though she said herself in a very recent interview that she was sort of talking about how these labels can be misleading. And this is a quotation from her about why she uses that genre, the crime genre, to get at other larger issues that she wants to write about. And she said, "Crime novels historically and all over the world have been one of the most effective literary tools to write about social issues, to reflect society. I am interested in writing about the society in which I live, its singularities, its dark sides. My priority is to write about this society. not its criminal side. However, a country can also be described through the crimes that are committed there. Just sort of fascinating. We had already read and discussed her earlier novel, All Yours, which was written in 2006 and translated into English in 2012. This book, All Yours, featured the main character, Inez, who is married to Ernesto, and they are the parents of Lali, or Laura. Inez knows right from the opening of this novel that Ernesto is having an affair, and she begins doing research to find out with whom. Both Ernesto and Inez do some pretty terrible things in this earlier novel. All the while, while they are completely neglecting their teenage daughter, Laura, who is having some terrible personal crises of her own, about which her parents seem to know nothing. This novel that we're talking about now, Time of the Flies, picks up 15 years later. Ernesto is not in this novel, except as an occasional mention as Inez's ex-husband, but he doesn't figure as a character in the story. He just gets mentioned occasionally. Now, in this novel, we are following the story of Inez, who is just out of prison. And it's also the story of her friend Manka, who is also just out of prison. She has become a private investigator. Inez develops a business in fumigation and pest control, where the only insects that she will not kill are flies. And that becomes sort of a motif running through the novel as well. Our group is absolutely struck by the fact that the Inez of this novel feels very, very different, from like a totally different character from the Inez of All Yours. And I found another interview that Pineiro gave about this book, and about just this idea that Inez feels like a totally different character. And she said, 20 years ago, I wrote the book, All Yours, where Inez kills her husband's lover. Inez was a completely patriarchal woman. She would have remained married to that man, even if he had been unfaithful. So Inez from 20 years ago doesn't kill Ernesto because despite everything, she still wants to be Ernesto's wife. Now, 20 years later, Inez is in prison. With the rise of the feminist movement, I think we all have changed, including me as a writer. I don't know if I would write Inez now the way I did 20 years ago. We're going to be continuing to talk about this book for a few more days, so I will hold off on my, giving my final thoughts about this book until we wrap up our discussion later this week. I will just say that it has been a really great experience so far, looking at Pineiro's body of work with this particular group of people, and I'll list everyone in the notes. These are both friends of mine who have BookTube channels, and they are also friends of ours who are viewers and commenters. Next up, our group will be reading Pineiro's novel, The Thursday Night Widows. we start this one later in this coming week. I also learned on the eve of its kickoff that there is an Agatha Christie reading event taking place right now. It's taking place from December 3rd through December 14th. And this is called the Christie's Missing Readathon 2024. This is an event created by Berna at Berna's Book Adventures, and it's co-hosted by a bunch of different people who I will also mention in the notes. They have designed this Agatha Christie reading event, and I think this is at least the second year that they've done this. But I wasn't here last year. I didn't know about, I actually just found out about it the other night. But I think this is the second readathon that they're doing, and I apologize if I'm wrong about that, if there have been more than two. But they have designed this reading event to take place during the day, corresponding with the dates corresponding with the 11 days that when Agatha Christie mysteriously went missing back in 1926. The group read for this event is the very first Miss Marple novel, Murder at the Vicarage. And as I have mentioned in some of my other videos, probably many videos, I have been sort of slowly working my way through Agatha Christie, specifically reading the Miss Marple novels recently. And I'm going to continue doing this into 2025. So I was thrilled to learn about this event and to learn that their group read is a Miss Marple novel. So I'm jumping in. I'm a little bit late to the party, but Berna tells me that that's just fine. So I have just started this one, The Murder at the Vicarage. And I will be discussing this more over the next few days. As I've mentioned several times, my in-person book group is about to meet, and we're talking about Matt Haig's The Life Impossible. We're actually meeting on this coming Monday to talk about this novel. This is Matt Haig's newest novel. This is the story of retired math teacher Grace Winters, who has lost both her only child and her husband. And she's leading a pretty lonely life when she suddenly receives word that she has inherited a house on a Mediterranean island. And this has been left to her by a former colleague and a casual friend, but someone she had not been in contact with for decades. So this comes out of nowhere, and she decides to go, to get on a plane and go check out this house that's been left to her, and she goes off on an adventure of a lifetime. I would say that this is a novel about getting a new lease on life late in life. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to hear what my friends thought about this. And we'll be discussing it, as I said, on Monday evening. And I'll share more about the book and what my group thought about it next week. Also starting on Monday is my buddy read with my buddy Alan and at Big Hard Books and Classics. And we are reading Ronan Hession's Leonard and Hungry Paul. We're both really looking forward to reading this. And to talking about this together. I'm in a quest right now to read things that will bring more light, I would say, more light into my days and nights. We have both been told that this book is funny and heartwarming without being sickeningly sweet. It was a finalist for the Irish Book of the Year and the British Book of the Year in 2021. It was selected for One Dublin, One Book in 2021. And it says on the back of the book that this is a disarming novel that asks a simple question: can gentle people change the world? And it also says that it is a book about the gentle, the meek, and the humble. It's about two friends who take care of their parents, who like to play board games, who like to read, who take satisfaction in their work, and who are resolutely kind. This sounds like my kind of book. Both Alan and I will be talking more about this next week. I'm really looking forward to this one. This week, I also did another episode in my series on books I loved to teach. I talked this week about the ancient Greek tragedy by Euripides, Medea, and I talked about that this week because Medea actually plays a really important role in the Claudia Pineiro book that we are discussing, Time of the Flies. I did a couple of tags this week, one on a Christmas theme and one looking at the end of the year and looking toward the new year. And I have a couple more of those kind of end of the year and holiday tags coming up in the next couple of weeks. I also did a Poetry Thursday episode. This week I talked about, or I read poetry on the theme of reading, the joys associated with reading. If there are topics that you would like me to try to address in my Poetry Thursday videos, I would love to hear about that. I mean, I do Poetry Thursday videos on individual poets, but I have also been doing some that are thematically based, and I take suggestions, I take requests. So if there's something that you'd like me to, put a video together about, drop me a note in the comments. I'd love to hear about that. So I think that pretty much wraps up the past week. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.